Have nowhere to go.
No, but I know why.
You know, it was even like when I used to play
I
saxophone.
know, he took a job at the chamber doing that.
Which was good. I enjoyed them both.
Yeah, no, he took a job with, he took a job with the Ness County Chamber doing lots, or doing tourism stuff, so he
And
can't
it was just, yeah,
be
no.
on that committee anymore.
It's too late for outside. He's on the way. Hey, Mike. So, personal.
It's 7 o'clock now.
And what does that mean?
I don't know. What does that mean? And go.
Okay, Beth says and go. It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody. This is the City of Ellensburg City Council meeting for the evening of Monday, October 4th, 2021. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Lamb.
No, it's fine. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If the clerk would call the roll.
Elliott,
Here.
Goodlow,
Here.
Lamb,
Here.
Lilquist, here, Miller,
Here.
Morgan, here, Tab.
I'm here. Thank you. That brings us to proclamations. We do have a proclamation this evening. This is on page 7 in the packet. It's the National Disability Employment Awareness Month proclamation. I do believe that Josh Hackney from Central Washington Disability Resources has consented to read.
All right. Can you guys hear me well enough?
Yep, that's great.
Whereas Ellensburg City Council is welcoming and inclusive and dedicated to improving the quality of life for those we serve. And whereas people with a disability are of all racial, ethnic, educational, social, and economic backgrounds, and all are valued members of society, fulfillment, living everyday lives. And whereas workplaces that welcome the talents of all people, including people with disabilities, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and strong economy. And whereas people with disabilities are irreplaceable resource and we cannot morally or financially afford to lose the contributions that people with disabilities bring, not only to the workplace, but also to the mainstream community life. And whereas in the spirit of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we can improve and expand access to education and opportunities for people with disabilities, and encourage employers to expand accommodations for their current and future employees, and ensure all Ellensburg residents can realize the promise of inclusion. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Tabb, Mayor of the City of Ellensburg, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2021 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month.
Thank you. Just to be clear, Josh is not me and never wanted to be me. I don't think. But I really appreciate you coming in to read the proclamation. Council,
Authorize the mayor's signature on the proclamation.
Second.
we have motion and second to authorize mayor's signature on National Disability Employment Awareness Month for October of 2021. Any further discussion?
So if an employer wanted to hire someone, who should they contact?
I believe that Central Washington Disability Resources works with a range of folks.
Okay.
Elmview is still doing employment services in the community. Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is a portal for state services and support. They would be, I think, good starting points for anyone seeking services. Any other questions?
I'll just add that Public Health houses the Developmental Disabilities Department for the county as well. So if employers are interested, a good place to start might be contacting the Developmental Disabilities Coordinator at Public Health.
Thank you.
It's Casey Knutson.
Yes, Casey Knudsen.
Okay, so we have a motion and second for the mayor's signature on the proclamation. Did we do all that in favor?
Not yet.
Not, all those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you. We have no awards or recognitions this evening. Moves us to approval of the agenda.
Mayor approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
So there's a correction to the minutes. Do we do that
Let's do
during
it.
consent?
I think we could do it in consent.
Okay.
So we have motion second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries, brings us to consent. Let's get a motion to,
A motion to amend the minutes of the special council retreat, September 24th, as presented on our in our places here.
Second.
so a motion second to amend the minutes of the city council retreat on September 24th. It's almost a Scrivener's area, but my recollection was, I think the word was launch and the change is to simply say the meeting was called to order at 8:04, just for the public. So it's clear. So we have a motion to amend the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I think we need a motion then to approve the amended consent
I
agenda.
move approval of the amended consent agenda.
Second.
We have motion and second to approve the amended consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you. And that brings us then to 6A. This is boards and commission applications. We're on page 110 in your packet if you're following. We have an opening on the Public Transit Advisory Committee. There are 3 individuals who have made application for that committee. Mackenzie Carter, Christopher King, and Sawyer Stearns. I'm not sure. I don't see Christopher here. And I'm not seeing anybody in our,
Christopher
He's
McKenzie up
on
there.
remote.
okay, what do we have? Sawyer anywhere? So let's, this is an opportunity for, I see Christopher's on the remote also. Thank you. And so is Mackenzie on? Yeah, and so who are we missing? So just help me, Sawyer? Okay, thank you. So let's start. So Mackenzie, this is an opportunity to introduce yourself to council, kind of your interest in this commission, and for you to ask us questions and in turn for council to ask if you have any questions.
That's great. Hello, everybody. My name is Mackenzie Carter. I am interested in joining this commission from the standpoint of improving health equity and a focus on improving, I work for the public health department in health promotion. And one of the grants that I work on is LSPAN. One of the component I focus on is physical activity and improving the environment around people and increasing opportunities for physical activity and for safe streets. There are a lot of programs that I've looked at and really seen the benefits to how public transit and transportation as a whole can contribute to the community's health. And I am really excited at the opportunity to work on this commission from that standpoint. I don't have any questions for you all at this time. Do you have any questions for me?
Council. Okay, seeing none. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We also have Christopher King. And again, this is an opportunity just to kind of introduce yourself, your interest in public transit and service on that committee.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Just want to say thank you, of course, for having me on. It's so great to be here. But yeah, I've been interested in sustainable transportation ever since a young age. I'm currently a senior here at Central Washington University. I'm studying aviation and also studying Spanish as well. And I think for me, just having the opportunity to connect citizens and students kind of throughout the greater Ellensburg area would be fantastic. You know, I think sustainable transportation is something that everywhere needs to work to increase those efforts there. And I have, of course, ridden the Ellensburg buses a couple times and absolutely love it. And I want to continue to help connect the individuals here in the community and connect them to the resources as well. But also, I definitely have a focus when it comes to sustainable transportation. So finding greener ways to conduct operations and whatnot, and also finding ways to interact with the community as well, I think is super important. Community awareness of public transportation is huge. Growing up on the west side over in Seattle, we have lots of access to public transit. And it's something that I'm super, super passionate about. And I would love to help out and really give back to the community that's given me a ton during my 4 years here at Central. So that's kind of all that I have for all of you today. If you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to share.
Thank you. Councilor Mary.
I'm just curious, are you leaving at the end of your graduation?
I think
Lost
you're
your
muted.
sound. We've lost your sound.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. I'm planning to stick around for another year or so. I'll be flight instructing at Central Washington University after this year up at the airport at Bowers Field. So.
Other questions? I would just note that I think Christopher, I met him when we were doing Bite of the Berg. We had a transit booth and had a conversation very similar to the one that he just presented to council, and talked about the opening. So I appreciate you following through and making the application. It's great. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
I still don't see Sawyer on any of my lists. So we will not make an we will not make an appointment this evening. Just kind of consider and then come back in our meeting on the 18th and look to make that appointment for that vacancy. This point, we still have one vacancy on the Business Development Authority Board, that's centrifuge, and we have two vacancies on the Appeals Board. Once this vacancy is filled, there will be no other vacancies for our boards and commissions.
Yes, I have a vacancy on lodging tax,
Oh, that's right. We just accepted that.
and that's only for hotelier.
Thank you. for pointing
But
that out.
even if there's no vacancies, anyone can apply for any board at any time, and we'll wait for the vacancy to come up.
Okay. We're now down to citizen comment on non-agenda items. I believe we have some folks that want to speak this evening. We have a number of people that want to speak. So again, this is citizen comment on non-agenda items. Issues which are brought before us need to be under council's purview. Each speaker will have will be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers are cautioned not to make comments of a personal, impertinent, or derogatory nature. You may not identify yourself as a candidate for elected public office or make any statements which assist or discuss the campaign of a candidate for elective office, or discuss or campaign for or against a ballot proposition unless the proposition is being considered as part of the council agenda item. Also, please note that city council rules provide that no action will be taken by council at the meeting at which a subject is first introduced during the citizen comment period. You may wish to concisely state your concern, request placement of your matter on a future agenda. However, this evening, we will not interact. Just, it's really an opportunity for us to hear and then move forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
can you remind them that they need to give their name and address?
Yeah. So when you do approach, please provide your name, your address, whether you're representing yourself or others. If we'll go through the in-person individuals first. And then if there's anyone who is participating virtually, we will call on them. I would ask that you raise your hand. If you're participating virtually and want to comment during citizen non-comment, wait until you're recognized, and then the same rules, name, address, whether you're representing yourself or others, and you'll have 3 minutes for your statement. Anyway, so let's get ourselves started. So the first individual signed up is Paula Hyatt.
My name is Paula Hyatt. I live at 1706 North Blue Grass Lane. I'm a lifetime resident here at Ellensburg. We have had now going on 2 years, 2 schools being built in our backyard. I now understand why nobody wants something happening in their backyard. I know that we have to have schools, and it's an investment in education in our kids. My grandkids will go there. However, there are some things that the school board has neglected to consider and see through at this project. And right now, it's only going to get worse with the opening of the second school here in a few days. Traffic in our neighborhood is horrendous. People flying through, sitting in a line in a half an hour in front of our houses. It needs to be addressed. The kids need, there's not even a stop sign at one of the streets that heads right into the construction area. There's no one helping the kids across the street, and somebody's going to get hurt, and we need to address it. There are a number of us here regarding that. A number of us are watching. We're going to be back before the council. We're going to do what we need to do to see that this gets addressed. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and let you know. But it really needs to happen. Somebody needs to take a serious look at it and address these issues. And just a side note, as elected officials, the superintendent of public schools should not hang up on people when they call. No one has been disrespectful to her at all. We're just trying to find out what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Charles Hyatt.
I'm Charles Hyatt. I live at 1706 North Bluegrass Lane. I walk up on the John Wayne Trail a lot, see a lot of families up there with kids riding bicycles, kids running up and down the John Wayne Trail. I noticed today that that they have gone in and put stop signs, 2 stop signs on each side of the John Wayne Trail to stop you from walking out onto Cora, but they haven't done anything to stop the traffic on Cora. And once the grasses and the bushes and stuff start growing up on the Forest Service land that goes right up to the sidewalks, you're going to see kids running out, bikes running out into that street, and the people on the street won't have any time at all to see them to stop. So I think you guys need to take a look at that. I think for the safety for the kids up there, not just going to school, but the kids on the John Wayne Trail, I think that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Karen Zwick.
Okay, Karen Zwick. I'm at 1704 North Bluegrass. And my concern is just the amount of traffic that we're getting on Bluegrass. When school lets out, especially, I sit on the front porch and I'm sitting out there enjoying our wonderful Ellensburg weather. And the amount of traffic that is zipping past to go pick up their kids is horrendous. And I can imagine what's going to happen when another school opens up too. And they're all racing to pick up kids or to take Bluegrass as a shortcut off to get onto 15th. So I think something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Kelleher.
Do you have a camera? I have some stuff that
It's behind you.
there.
Well, so what are you needing, Pat?
So you can see, I have some pictures and some other things that I'd like to.
The document thing there.
So we can distribute those if you want.
I don't think he has copies.
Okay.
Do we have a way of solving this so that people can see it?
So typically we would not have folks post images, and so we can actually collect those afterwards and circulate those around. They can become
Okay.
part of the record.
Yeah, I think we're good. We're good, Drew. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Pat Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Road. I want to report an emergency flooding that's happening right now. Typically, when flooding occurs, you respond. The sand trucks go dump a load of sand in the neighborhood with sandbags, and you fill them and you put them to prevent further damage because of the flooding. I've been here before to speak when you were considering doing a lot line adjustment that was going to obviate the need for $3 million of mitigation in the traffic constructed for the school. So since the schools are getting ready to open, the new one is getting ready to open, I said, hey, I'm going to go up there and check things out. And sure enough, I turned on to Cora and there was a flooding. It was backed up all the way to 15th. Well, I went a little further and sure enough, here's one of your officers going, ma'am, hey, is this flooding affecting you? Because you parked in a no parking zone. You're causing the flooding. Then I went to the head of the stream and I was in the southbound lane and all the northbound was coming towards me and a guy cut into my lane because it was quicker. And then he cut through these people's neighborhood. Now in your traffic report, however, it should be noted that these school projects should only have a minimal impact on city streets and intersections. That's the official traffic report done by these individuals that are engineers, surveyors, planners, and scientists. Okay, these scientists did a existing condition. This is your existing condition from 2:30 to 3:30 before the project, 27 people heading south on Cora. Then the scientists said, hey, what's going to happen in 2025 when we do these projects? This is what they said. They got, oh, it's going to grow to 38. Well, a non-scientist took this tally today. It's 138 heading south with peak traffic in a 15-minute period of over 93 cars. You have a mess. The people of this neighborhood community are not part of the problem. They're not going to be part of the solution. What I recommend is you declare an emergency and barricade those two access roads into the neighborhoods until the flooding stops. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nancy Kaspari.
I'm Nancy Kaspari. I live at 1718 North Bluegrass Lane. And I too have a lot of concerns about the traffic. A neighbor of mine, she was coming home a few days ago and was in a huge line of cars. She couldn't even get to her home. So the next 2 days later, I stood in my window at a little after 3 and counted over 35 cars in 8 minutes that drove from the school through Bluegrass Lane. And again, we have children, we have animals, we have families, we have all these people that live there. It's always been a very, very quiet neighborhood, and that is not the case. And again, there's only one school open so far, and it's just going to be horrendous. I was asked by my husband and another neighbor up the street on Cora Street to ask what the safe route to the school plan prior to the school being built is. So I'd like to know, have that checked out of what is the safe route that was supposed to be done prior to the school opening. And I also agree on the trail, which I guess is Calusa Cascade now. I walk it all the time, and it's been a lovely trail. It's one of the busiest trails on our system. And now they just cut a road right through it. They have no plans as to what to do as far as the people that like to use it as biking, like walking, running, playing, skateboarding, whatever. They have no plans at all how to address that. And I really would like all this addressed because it is very frustrating. And it's only been open for a couple of weeks now, the school. So thank you.
Thank you. I have, is it Laura and David? Is it Lagier?
David and Lorraine agree. She'll do most of the talking. I might just add before she starts, I use that trail all the time too. And every time both on bicycle and on foot, and every time I cross that new lane that's been put in for the schools, I hold my breath. I've had to jump curbs with my bicycle, and that's finally been smoothed out. But I think there is a traffic issue, but that's not why I'm here. They just inspired me. We're here. Lorraine would like to use her time to tell you about a project we're undertaking.
Yeah, so this is called the Bike Bells Project. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about it. It was May 17th and a very windy spring day in Ellensburg. My husband, David, and I were going on our usual walk, starting at Rotary Park, crossing under I-90 to Irene Reinhardt Park. We were about 12 yards from the trail under I-90 when a bicyclist came up behind and in between us. David heard him say something, but I was startled and turned to my right to see what the noise was. And the next second, I fell to my left with all my weight on my left hip. I tried to get up, but couldn't. And as a retired nurse, I knew I probably had a fracture. Fortunately, the bicyclist was very helpful, stayed with me while David went to the car,
because unfortunately, none of us had our cell phones with us. So the bicyclist said at the time, I need to get a bell for my bike. That brings us to our project of bike bells 4 months later. We submitted an action project through ThriveEnd, an insurance company that David's mother had used to take out a small policy when he was only 16 years old. Well, now ThriveEnd is offering seed money for a Make a Difference in Your Community with Your Community project. We were approved and have since communicated with Nancy Wilquist and met with Fred Johnston at the Recycle Bike Shop on Main Street. Our goal is to give away bike bells that have a strong ring to bicyclists to increase safety on park trails, and to do this on Saturday, October 16th or 23rd at the bike shop between 10 a.m. and 5:30. Also, our hope is to have permanent new signage at our parks about basic trail etiquette, even at small parks. Just last Thursday, while walking with a friend at McElroy Park, several children on bikes arrived with 2 women supervising them on their bikes. They were riding 2 by 2 and some were in single file, but we just stayed off the trail while they passed. So Bike Bells is our project to promote safety and health for our community. We hope to get information out via newspaper, youth services, and Facebook with the help of Brad Case. If this is successful, we can continue it and do it in the spring of May 2022 with the Ride Your Bike to Work Day, if that happens. So do you have any questions?
No, I appreciate the work and the information. Thank you.
Can
you please give your address?
Pardon?
Can you please give your address?
805 North B Street, Ellensburg.
Thank you.
And I have some samples of bike trails that are posted in Seattle at the Burke-Gilman Trail that are samples.
If you can share, just if you can send them to the city manager's office, then that can get shared with council. If you have. Let's move on down then. Lee Bates. I wasn't going to.
I'm rather loquacious too, so you probably will have to deem me.
Are you going to sing it?
Yeah.
We don't pay during citizen comment.
My name is Lee Bates and I reside, middle initial R. And I reside at 1802 North Bluegrass Lane, Ellensburg. I'd like to start out by saying I believe public education, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart, is the cornerstone of our democracy. I am a proud public school teacher. I taught in the Lake Washington School District where I retired in 2003, my wife in 2002. I know schools inside out, upside down, taught every grade K through seniors in high school. I will tell you, I know you're the city council, not the school board. I have never in my life seen such an absurd thing to have 2 elementary schools literally within a stone's throw from one another. Now, a middle school next to an elementary school, or even like by Valley View to have a school near the high school is one thing, but 2 elementary schools, it's absurd, frankly. And I don't know how the city could have allowed 2 schools with over 500 children and staff and parents to be accessed by one route, which is Cora. Originally, if you've studied the plans, you would know that it was to be 2 schools having their own separate ingress, egress. Idanes and Aronica was to have either Illinois or Helena as its access point. I suspect, and I like data, I don't like just supposition, but I suspect a deal was made between the city and the school district because the mitigation to do the work, the infrastructure was probably too expensive for the school district. But our community is paying the price, the taxpayers, the citizens, and my friends and neighbors, these beautiful people back here are paying the price for the poor little children. And my heart goes out to those kids when I see them walking and their parents racing through our streets. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm telling you, I sat on my porch today, my wife and I both. Some are very good, others race up and down. This is a problem in our culture right now, where people basically don't want to follow rules and be decent. And it's time it stopped. Something does need to be done. I'll reiterate what I heard my good neighbor say. Something does need to be done. I have 3 solutions. It's easy to complain, isn't it? People do it all the time, but I have a solution for you. Number one.
You have 15 seconds.
Okay. Number one, speed bumps. Some people, I don't like them, but speed bumps. Number 2, gates on our access to our community. 3, improve the 2 streets so Aronica has its own access. It's unfair to the people, to the citizens. Thank you. And I would have sung, but
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. And no, it's good. We appreciate it. Jason Pfeiffer.
Good evening. I am Jason Pfeiffer. I go by Jay. I live on 1713 North Bridgewood Lane, which is directly parallel to the new Mount Stewart Elementary. We are in a kind of a weird situation. I have a 6-year-old daughter who goes to Mount Stewart, and having the school there is super convenient for me. I'm not going to lie about it. But the last 18 months have been a special kind of hell living next to that construction site. And the whole time we just kept thinking, it's going to be done and it's going to be worth it. All of this dust, it's going to be worth it. 6 days a week, 12 hours a day construction, it's going to be worth it. Police blowing stuff up without telling anyone what they're doing, it's going to be worth it. And then the school finally opened, and the first day I went down there and I was like, holy crap, it's bedlam. It was like a Mad Max scene. You had traffic 3 lanes deep, all the way down Cora, all the way to the end of 15th down 15th, blocking off all the houses on the bottom of Cora, blocking off the streets to get into our community. And the problem is, Cora just cannot handle that amount of traffic. It's just not going to happen. And then the issue is, once Cora backs up, because there's no signage out there, it's an unfinished project. There are no school zone signs, there's no crosswalks, there's no parking signs, there's no lines on the road. No one seems to know what they're doing or actually care about what they're doing. So you have these kids coming out of the school, they then have to make it through 3 lines of traffic just to get to the top of the stairs. Then they get to the top of the stairs, and then they've got to make it through 3 lanes of traffic just to get across the street. No crosswalks, no stop signs, no crossing guards. It's like the Squid Game, you know? I mean, these kids are just like running through like they're Frogger. And me and my wife and I went to all the meetings, we went to the planning. We were on board with the other school having a street that connected at Christie or one of the other roads that took it out. And we were actually shocked to find out that that isn't going to happen. And what are we going to do on the 18th when you double the amount of traffic going down the one street that can't handle that traffic already? So basically what has happened at this point is, as soon as Cora blocks up, everyone starts using our neighborhood, Stonebridge, basically as surface streets, going through anywhere between 35, 50 miles an hour. They're cutting up Bluegrass. They're going up Stonebridge. When Bluegrass and Stonebridge back up, they rip down Bridgewood Lane where I live. The woman the other day, I was getting in my car, came flying around the corner.
5 seconds. You have 3 minutes, you have 5 seconds.
Okay. And I just asked her to slow down, and she told me to mind my own business. So, I mean, these aren't people who are going to understand and take things. They're going to need to be told.
Thank you. I don't know how to turn it off. Thank you. I have no one else signed up. Does anyone else? Does anyone else wish to approach council? Does anyone in our virtual audience wish to speak on a non-agenda item? Seeing no one. So I think we're going to move on through the agenda. There are a couple things though before we go. And one is I really appreciate everyone coming down and being as articulate and specific as you have been. We actually are aware, though getting this level of detail and personal impact, I think is invaluable for us as council and for staff to hear. So again, I just really appreciate it. I can't breach once we've done the 3-minute, I'm sorry. I would also share with you that there's already a meeting scheduled between city staff and school district staff because of the awareness that because this has been brought to our attention. I can't tell you what the outcome is of that meeting or what response would be or what the city's response would be, but I can tell you that we were aware of this issue prior to your coming down. And I would also again share that I appreciate the specificity and personal nature of the impact. Certainly you can sign up for updates so we can communicate with you directly if you would like as this process unfolds. So with that, again, thanks for coming down this evening and sharing what's going on in your neighborhood. So we'll now move on to 8. Is it? My finger's off. What number? The numbers in the agenda are off.
Yeah, but if you look below, it's 8A. 8A.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So let's go then to 8A. This is page 118 in your packets. I ask your patience. This is a public hearing. The purpose of this hearing is for the city council to receive information on the 2022 proposed revenue sources, including property tax for the city's budget. However, no action will be taken tonight following tonight's hearing. An ordinance on the 2022 ad valorem tax will be presented to city council at its November 1st, 2021 meeting. Public hearing is now open. I ask your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. I will first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any persons attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually via Zoom, please raise your hand in the Zoom meeting screen, press *9 if you are connected by telephone only. Wait until you have been recognized and you have been unmuted. When you're invited to speak, please begin by stating your name and address and indicate whether you're speaking for yourself individually or as a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the council. Before we do hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Keith Bassett with the city's finance department. As part of the public hearing this evening, I'm here to present a brief overview of the city's forecast 2022 revenues. In order to meet the statutory requirements for revenue setting, this public hearing and presentation is focused on the so-called current expense budget of the city. You may think of this as the city's general fund operating budget, providing ongoing services and primarily funded by taxes, charges for services, and governmental fines and forfeitures. Let me see if I can share my screen. This specifically excludes capital expenditures, utility and internal service funds, and special assessment budgets. The estimates were prepared for next year and includes a 1% increase in base property tax revenues, which was included in the original 2021-2022 biennial budget as adopted. This time of year, you are part of the conversation regarding the implicit price deflator and impact on the city's ability to collect property tax revenues. The implicit price deflator, which is used as part of the city's property tax levy limit calculation, was published by the state last week for 2022 at 3.86%. This means despite a projected inflation rate of 3.86%, the city could increase property tax revenues by up to 1% for 2022. Anytime I mention these figures, I like to clarify the 1% included in the budget is an increase in property tax revenues, not the effective property tax rate. These estimated revenues are at a single point in time. COVID has introduced a lot of risks that may have always been out there, but were never at the front of our imagination. There are uncertain impacts, including COVID stimulus money, both programs that have ended or have been initiated, that the impact will be on our local economy, supply chain issues, and public health policy decisions related to reopening. Procedurally, this public hearing is the first of several revenue-related activities. As you mentioned, there is no action needed tonight. And in November, the 2022 revenues will be back on your agenda for consideration of the ad valorem tax ordinance and a public hearing and council consideration of the mid-biennial budget review as required by state law. Before we jump to the revenue estimate data, I wanted to frame the city operations we're talking about when it comes to the current expense budget in the general fund. These are the core governmental services of the city: police, library, parks and recreation, community development, city administration and finance, city clerk, economic development, general governmental and engineering services. Some of these have multiple revenue streams funding outside the current expense budget, although debt service and street and arterial street expenditures are not accounted for in the city's general fund. The funds do receive significant general governmental support. The largest revenue source for 2022 is taxes, with approximately $13 million in revenue, followed by charges for services with approximately $4 million in revenue, intergovernmental revenues of approximately $3.4 million, fines and penalties of approximately $256,000, and miscellaneous revenue of $293,000. Including available beginning fund balance, estimated total general fund funding sources totals approximately $28.6 million. Jumping into the tax details, sales tax continues to be the city's largest source of general governmental tax revenues, estimated to collect approximately $6.3 million in 2022. The estimates use the first 8 months of sales tax trends to estimate the remaining 2021 amounts, and 6% increase over 2021 estimates for the 2022 estimates. This is based off annualizing the increase over 2019 revenues, since 2020 had so many COVID-related outliers. The second largest estimated tax revenue source is property taxes, estimated to bring in $3.4 million in revenue in 2022. As I mentioned earlier, the adopted 2022 budget includes a 1% increase in base property tax revenues over 2021. Business and occupation taxes remains the third largest source of tax revenues for 2022, estimated to bring in approximately $3.2 million. The bulk of these taxes are from the city's various utility taxes. And other taxes are estimated to bring in approximately $80,000 in 2022. For non-tax revenue, charges for services are estimated to bring in approximately $4 million in 2022. This includes interdepartmental revenue, payments for administration, finance, general government, and engineering services provided to other funds of the city, utilities, public transit, etc. Estimates for 2022 are below the adopted budget amount for charges for services due to lingering COVID pandemic effects on facility hours, number of program attendees, and in many cases, these revenues directly support the program costs and are not connected with the balance of the programs offered. Intergovernmental revenue is anticipated to bring approximately $3.4 million in 2022. Of that, $2.95 million is anticipated to be received from the state and local fiscal recovery fund program of the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. The balance of intergovernmental revenue is regular state shared revenues and minor grants that are included in the estimates. Shared revenues are always interesting subjects because of the influence the legislature can have on the amount of the distributions and what is received by cities. The total percentage change estimated between 2021 and 2022 revenues is 1.9%. Fines and forfeits have been significantly reduced under COVID. And so utility, late fee, and parking infraction fee revenues are anticipated to increase significantly for 2022. Otherwise, other than assumed growth in underlying taxable economic activity and baseline small increases in other revenues, all of the forecasts are fairly straight line between 2021 and 2022. Including the estimated beginning fund balance, total general fund revenues and funding sources is projected to be 0.8% less in 2022 than the estimated 2021 amounts. The city's regular retail sales tax is projected to provide significant support to street and arterial street funds in 2022, approximately $2.2 million. Only 38% of the sales tax support is forecast to be directed towards general governmental services. This can surprise people, but it is a over time growing portion of how the city's sales tax revenue is spent. City policy states that one-time revenues should generally support one-time costs. And one example of this is construction sales tax, which is retail sales tax paid on public and private investments in infrastructure and buildings. In 2019 and 2020, construction sales tax revenues have partially funded regular operating costs. And there's nothing for action this evening, but this is just one consideration as revenue decisions are made later this year. A couple of items to notice in the regular retail sales tax revenue change over time. First, the expected dive of retail sales tax revenues in 2020 due to COVID did not materialize, although some businesses and industries experienced devastating decreases in business activity. The general experience over the last 2 years has been growing retail sales and resulting revenue to the city. As of August, reflecting retail sales that happened through June, revenues are up by 20% year over year. Since July of 2020, monthly sales tax revenues have been greater than any same month revenues. In conclusion, again, this is just a public hearing and council consideration only, no action needed tonight. And 2022 revenues will be back in front of you for further consideration and action in November. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Does anyone from the public wish to address council? We no longer have a cast of thousands in chambers. And does anyone who's attending virtually wish to address this? Seeing no one, does staff have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions of staff or the public?
I do, yes.
what's the difference between our sort of maximum taxing capacity and understand, I'm not asking this to suggest that we take that, but as the 1% has kicked in year over year, our capacity goes down. What's left on the table?
So are you, the difference between 1% and inflation over time, or?
What's our authorized tax rate based on what we could get versus what we are collecting? What's the difference in property tax?
That is a great question. I do not have an answer for you at this moment.
Is that called banked capacity?
Yes, I mean, I've heard it referred to that, but because we're limited to 1%, and obviously in general, property values go up more than 1%. The actual rate of property tax in the city goes down compared to the value of the property. And so there's a difference, assuming the property values go up more than 1%, that gap always widens. And I'm just wondering what that gap is.
So this is Heidi. I don't have that number for you, but we can get that. And I believe our maximum is at the 310. And do you know the current property rate, tax rate? Keith?
But what we made, it's going to come back to us when we have to consider the ad valorem. So I think that might be an appropriate time to have that number.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's a good question.
Got a question.
Sure, David.
Keith, thanks for the information. And I don't need detail, but I was just curious, your comment about the construction sales tax being used to support operations, which could have been in 20 and 21 or 19 and 20. I wrote it down, but I wasn't sure. Is that something, have we made assumptions going forward about that practice? Are we, in terms of our projections, have we gotten over that yet? Because we've deviated away from the one-time funding source being used for one-time projects, right? Because of the circumstances, if I understood correctly.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council Member Miller, yes, it is something that happened in 2019 and 2020. However, I'm not certain that it is a trend that would be indicative of what we'd be looking at for 2021 or 2022. However, it is something that is probably needs to be addressed on the expenditure side as opposed to on the revenue side. We are limited to those. The revenues are what they are, and in some instances, our operations are what they are. And so it's just looking at projecting industry, how much of this revenue is one-time versus ongoing. And it's something that we always look at, but is not always clear until the year is over.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that. I think it's a policy issue, and I think we're.
Other questions?
So on page 123, the pie graph of the general tax funds, over time, I'm assuming that has changed proportions. So over time, has the 26% that is from property taxes, is that less of a proportion of that pie? Is that a smaller piece of the pie than it used to be?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lilyquist, yes, that is a safe assumption. I do not have the detailed figures in front of me right now. However, over time, the percentage of our tax revenues that have been funded through property taxes has been decreasing. And part of that is because of the 1% limitation that even unchained to property values necessarily, or the city's costs of general governmental operations, the amount that is collected for property taxes grows at a much lower rate.
So presumably that makes the sales tax a bigger piece of the pie as opposed, well, or is it B&O, the other slice?
It's sales tax or has been a constraint on city operations, that the revenue collected through general sales tax is subject to general sales. When we're looking at over time how this changes, there have been at times increases to the city's utility tax rates, but that has been at least 6 years. And so the growth of tax rate is one way that these amounts can change, or these percentages can change. And all in all, the bigger driver of our various taxes has been the underlying taxable activity.
Thank you. Other questions? Public testimony of this portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may now begin its discussion and deliberation. I would note that no action is required, so I don't know that we need to deliberate or discuss. So we'll move on. Let's then go to another public hearing. This is item 8B. 8B is on page 128 of your agenda if you're following. This is a public hearing for adoption of the Ellensburg Housing Action Plan. The purpose of this hearing is for the City Council to consider a resolution adopting the 2021 Housing Action Plan. Public hearing is now open. I ask your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making recording of the proceedings. I'll first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any persons attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually via Zoom, you must raise your virtual hand on the Zoom meeting screen or press *9 if you're connected by telephone only. Wait until you've been recognized and you have been unmuted. When you are invited to speak, please begin by stating your name and address. Indicate whether you're speaking for yourself or others. Spokesperson for a certain group of both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the council. Before we do hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
Good evening, council, mayor. Appreciate being here today. I'm going to actually take a few minutes with you as a community development director to just describe a little bit about the process and the analysis, but then we actually have our consultants online today as well. And we're going to hear from a couple of, at least one of our members of our consulting team from Burke Consulting. So just wanted to give you a heads up there. In the report, I noted that housing has long been a goal of the state of Washington. They want to make sure that everyone is in a decent home and a healthy, safe environment for every resident in the state. And the state, when they created the Growth Management Act in 1993, recognized that at that time as a huge priority. And we've just continued to see unprecedented growth in the state. And so they've taken several actions over time, but in 2019, they did pass another House bill that was focused on helping communities create actionable items for increasing the housing units and affordability in their communities. So House Bill 1923 also provided grant funds for communities to develop a housing action plan. We did apply for that and were awarded. And we did enter into a contract with Burke Consulting in 2021. And I feel very fortunate that the city was able to get their services because they're actually quite the setting the standard in the state for how to develop a housing action plan. And they had done all the work for us when we adopted our comprehensive plan in 2017. They developed the data for a housing needs assessment, worked with us and the county on a buildable lands capacity, and had all that data. And then when we adopted our comprehensive plan, if you'll recall, we did receive an award for the housing chapter of our comp plan from the state. And aside from that, you as City Council have continually taken action to demonstrate your commitment to providing housing for our own community members. And many of you helped in getting the 1.1% affordable housing sales and use tax passed in 2017. You've since created the Affordable Housing Commission, and you've offered up grants and surplus properties to go toward that as well. Now, going back to the specific housing action plan, you held 3 study sessions in June, July, and August to discuss various aspects of the plan. And then I wanted to point out that the state did develop a guidance document which outlined the required elements of a housing action plan. One was to have a housing needs assessment to help you inform your plan. And so with Burke on board, we were able to update the previous figures, and we have a 2021 housing action or housing needs assessment in place. And we're required to have community and stakeholder engagement, which we did. We needed to review our housing policy framework in both the comp plan and the land development code, which we've done. We needed to develop strategies for housing development, and I listed the 4 items you needed to include in your strategies. It's to increase the housing supply, increase the variety of housing types, increase the supply of housing affordability to all income levels, and include an evaluation of the potential efficacy of the proposed strategies. We also needed to include strategies that would minimize displacement of low-income residents due to redevelopment. We needed to have an implementation and monitoring plan and adoption. And so tonight we're at the adoption piece. But I did want to let you know that we, just leading up to this, there's other steps we had to follow. We did go to the Planning Commission, and they held their public hearing on Thursday, October 7th. They did recommend approval of that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. We also went through the SEPA review process and issued a determination of non-significance. From the Planning Commission, they did forward a recommendation of approving the plan. They did also forward some recommendations for which items to prioritize. And while that's much appreciated, staff would just simply note that that is some work that can come later. And they also made a recommendation that strategy number 4 should be prioritized but reworded to encourage the construction of multi-unit housing rather than multiplex. And just simply due to industry definition, staff recommends that council adopt, if you choose to adopt it, you keep the wording as it was already written. And I just do want to point out that while delivering the housing action plan will satisfy a grant requirement, staff does intend to utilize this as a guiding document to continue to work with the Planning Commission, City Council, our community members, in really analyzing and diving deeper in as we take action to improve the housing situation in our community. Now, before I turn it over to Burke, I do want to point out that on the dais, you were each given a piece of paper that had some staff recommended edits. I don't want to go into those just yet, but for the most part, a lot of them are edits. And then there's a couple of a little bit more substantive ones, but that kind of comes into play with what Burke is going to present to you. I want to give them the opportunity to present what they've pulled together in conjunction with staff. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Ramsey, who is the project director with Burke Consulting.
Hello, thank you, Kirsten, for that introduction, and thank you to the mayor and council for inviting me here today. I'm going to share my screen here with you. Let's see. And go to slideshow. 1 second. Okay, here we are. So again, my name is Kevin Ramsey. I'm an associate principal at Burke, which is a public policy consulting firm based in Seattle. As Kirsten mentioned, we work a lot with housing and with cities and counties across the state. And this is the 3rd study that I've worked on with the city of Ellensburg and Kirsten. And I actually worked closely with my colleague, Lisa Johnson, who actually led Burke's work on this, but unfortunately is unable to present to you today, but she is in the audience and may be able to answer questions as well. So Kirsten covered most of this, but Housing Action Plan basically outlines strategies to address the need for more housing diversity, and housing affordability for residents of all different income levels. Again, it was funded by a grant from the Department of Commerce. It identifies priorities and implementation considerations for housing policies and programs that the city could consider. And it requires data analysis. So it's based on an assessment of housing needs, a review of current housing policies, and engagement with community members. I'm going to give a quick overview of the public engagement work that informed this plan. There are 2 key elements. One was a stakeholder advisory group, and the next was a community survey. The advisory group met at 3 points during the plan's development, and it's been a guiding voice to consider many of the different community needs that they are tuned into. And we also surveyed community members about primarily about visual preferences for various different housing types throughout different parts of the city. There was 233 responses, which have been really helpful for understanding their priorities and concerns. A quick overview. Both renters and homeowners expressed concerns about housing affordability. We heard about the importance of maintaining the visual character and small town feel of Ellensburg. And we heard about a desire for encouraging more walkability and mixed use development in some neighborhoods. This is just an example of the types of questions and responses that we got in the survey. Here we show several different kinds of duplexes that could be allowed and encouraged in single family areas. And we asked respondents if they feel these examples would be appropriate. Overall, as you can see in the charts here, the responses indicated that most residents are supportive of allowing duplexes and other kind of missing middle housing types within single family zones. That's a term used to describe kind of gentle density in between detached single family homes and in larger apartment buildings, which dominate Ellensburg's housing stock currently. So this finding helps to confirm and strengthen several of the related strategies in the plan related to encouraging missing middle development. And these results will also be helpful in the implementation phase of the project when considering any zoning changes and the prioritization of strategies. So the plan itself is organized into 3 goals and 14 strategies. And I'm going to briefly walk through these goals and strategies one by one here. So the 3 goals of the Housing Action Plan are to produce more housing, to add variety to the housing stock, and to preserve and create income restricted housing units or affordable housing. These goals each target key challenges identified in the housing market, which are low supply, a lack of housing diversity, and decreasing affordability as housing prices continue to rise in Ellensburg, particularly impacting lower income households. Additionally, a big theme throughout the plan is avoiding and mitigating the displacement of existing residents and businesses as the city encourages new growth. And a few of the strategies explicitly address that theme. And I know Council recently adopted 5 milestones for addressing housing needs over the next decade, which are strongly aligned with these 3 goals. The milestones will be important to prioritizing implementation actions and tracking their effectiveness over time. So the first goal is to increase housing production. The needs assessment showed that historic housing production has not kept pace with projected demand. One indicator of this is extremely low vacancy rates, both among rentals and ownership housing stock that we found in the needs assessment. This results in high competition for a limited supply of available units, which pushes up rents and housing costs. And the best way to address this problem is to just encourage more new housing production overall to meet that demand. The second goal is to add more diversity to the housing stock. The chart here shows how the housing inventory in Ellensburg is dominated by either single family homes, which are shown there in gray, or larger apartments buildings, which is the bar there in green. So there's a big theme in this plan is encouraging, as I mentioned before, missing middle options such as duplexes, townhomes, backyard cottages, accessory dwelling units, other ways to introduce more kind of gentle density into existing neighborhoods, as well as areas that can take more growth. These changes can both allow increased supply within existing neighborhoods, as I mentioned, increases the range of housing options available to accommodate different household types, including residents looking for a more affordable price point than is typically provided with new single-family homes. Third goal is to preserve and create more income-restricted affordable housing in Ellensburg. This refers specifically to units set aside with lower rents that are more affordable to qualified moderate or low income households. The chart here illustrates the urgency of this problem. Based on the most recently available data, over 45% of households living in Ellensburg, or over 3,500 in total, are cost burdened. And this means that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Worse yet, over a quarter of the households in Ellensburg are severely cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than half of their income on housing. So many of these households are in the other category shown here in the chart. which many of whom are likely to be students at the university. But there are also high levels of cost burden among small families and older adults living alone. So the problem is widespread throughout the community. And the plan introduces strategies customized to address the unique needs of these different kinds of households. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk through the 14 strategies which we identified to achieve these 3 goals. The first 5 of them are grouped here on one slide because they all are getting at the central goal of encouraging missing middle housing production. And this includes, so there's separate strategies that are really targeted at the challenges and opportunities to encourage these 5 different housing types. The first being townhomes, cottage housing, which are smaller lot single family homes, encouraging the production of ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units. So these could be backyard cottages or units within an existing single family home, such as a basement or a granny flat or a conversion of a garage. Also encouraging the production of multiplex housing, so duplexes, triplexes, and encouraging the production of condominiums to provide more ownership housing opportunities at lower price points in higher density housing. And we reviewed the details of zoning districts and regulations for these specific types of housing to identify what could be the biggest barriers to production of these housing types. Some of the types aren't allowed at all in certain zones, and others might be allowed in theory, but the details of regulations make it very difficult or totally infeasible to actually build them. Common regulatory barriers include density maximums that are too low, special approvals needed in different circumstances, parking requirements, driveway and alley standards, and overall code language that can be difficult for developers to interpret. And another big barrier is lack of demonstrated market performance in Ellensburg. Since many of these types of housing are not yet common, there's greater uncertainty about the potential market demand, and this increases project risk, and it reduces the willingness of developers and lending institutions to give these housing types a try. So finding opportunities for demonstration projects or pilot programs could help to test and demonstrate the market demand to help make these product types more feasible as well. The 6th strategy recommends some broader improvements for the overarching zoning code. This includes a comprehensive update of the design guidelines and zoning category descriptions to help make missing middle housing types more viable, and also aligned with the character and aesthetics desired by residents for different parts of the city. The 7th one is strategically rezoning for more mixed use development. This is something that we heard through the community survey, which is consistent with the direction established in the 2017 future land use map. The city's been implementing the changes from that map. So part of this strategy is to continue that effort. In our stakeholder advisory group, we also heard support for zoning changes that would go even farther than reflected in the future land use map to allow for development that is dense, walkable, and promotes mixed use neighborhoods. This plan also mentions considerations for low income renter protections in upzoned areas where development pressures may be increased. The 8th strategy is preserving income restricted affordable housing developments. So this focuses on the need to preserve housing that have affordability covenants before those covenants expire and the housing is converted to market rate. Actions the city can take to support this strategy include maintaining an inventory of the affordable housing stock with the expiration dates of those covenants. And by monitoring that inventory, the city can anticipate and prioritize actions to secure that housing for longer term affordability. Ellensburg can also consider passing a notice of intent to sell ordinance, which would require owners of multifamily buildings to notify tenants and the local housing officials prior to the sale of the property. And this can give the city a chance to intervene and make an offer on the property, for example. And finally, the city can partner with nonprofit affordable housing developers and the Kittitas Housing Authority to leverage funds to strategically acquire existing affordable units and ensure that they stay affordable into the future. So ninth is updating housing incentives to encourage the production of missing middle housing and affordable units. So this includes actions such as restructuring missing middle bonus to include infill development. Currently, the way the missing middle bonus is structured, it's not particularly effective for encouraging this type of development. Targeting lower income brackets with the multifamily tax exemption program. The city currently has a program, but it could be refined and expanded to different areas to encourage the use of it to get at lower levels of affordability. Reduced parking requirements near transit, particularly for affordable units. Parking can add a lot of cost to housing, and in some areas of the city that have good access to transit and that are serving lower income populations, it might be quite viable to allow for lower parking requirements there, to reduce the cost to develop that housing and really make affordable housing dollars go farther to provide more housing for more people. And finally, clarifying the process of operating income restricting units for developers, particularly when encouraging developers to do mixed income or including affordable units within market rate projects. Clarify that process of how to operate those can be a big barrier. It can help overcome some barriers for developers. So next year, the 10th strategy is around research, to research and implement financial strategies that can construct affordable housing units, and particularly income restricted affordable housing, and really kind of squeezing the most benefit from city funds that are invested in affordable housing. It calls for researching the feasibility of tax increment financing programs, as well as land donations opportunities to support affordable housing production. It also calls for building partnerships with human service providers who can integrate wraparound services near new affordable housing projects, and using local housing funds, including the sales and use tax credit program, to directly support affordable housing construction. The 11th strategy is supporting relocation assistance for residents of manufactured home parks when those parks are sold. So the city here has some opportunities. First, the existing laws that park owners must give 12-month notice to homeowners in those parks prior to closing the park. It requires owners to submit a relocation plan, or the city could require owners to submit a relocation plan upon closure. And raising awareness of and supplementing relocation existing programs, such as the program available through the state of Washington, to help people that own manufactured home or mobile homes within these parks to relocate if possible to another location. 12 is continuing outreach and education on housing needs and the existing systems that support access to housing. Here, it's continuing efforts such as the online housing dashboard. There's a screenshot of it here that you created a couple years ago, and expanding upon that. Also using online engagement software to stay in touch with the community, both to kind of help educate as well as help getting input as the city pursues implementation of many of these strategies. Making progress progress updates to the community on implementation and outcomes as this housing action plan is implemented. And then promoting existing programs such as down payment assistance, homeowner education, to create more awareness to get more residents to make use of those to provide for access to housing. 13 is building a partnership with the Ellensburg Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. And this can be done to kind of strengthen engagement and education with particularly communities of color within Ellensburg to help make sure that the housing system in Ellensburg is inclusive and of all community members. Gathering input about unique housing needs and barriers experienced by communities of color, and identifying signals of displacement risk with a focus on cultural displacement and communities of color. And finally, there's the last strategy here is developing and supporting programs that minimize displacement. So these include foreclosure intervention counseling, property tax exemptions and deferrals, particularly for low income or seniors, emergency rental assistance to help people in a difficult spot so they don't get evicted, sweat equity programs and land trust options, and developing systems and tools to track displacement risk in the city so that the city can create plans to intervene. So those are the strategies. The next steps in the action plan does include some implementation material as well. So after adoption, the next steps will be prioritizing strategies and actions for a first phase of implementation of the plan. It identifies action steps and estimates level of effort and cost for each strategy at a broad level. And then the city's going to need to balance the availability of staff capacity and funding to set a more detailed agenda and work plan for implementing and prioritizing the actions in this plan. And then following implementation, we'll be monitoring progress. So implementation could be tracked, in a more detailed work plan of prioritized actions, and the city can track that and provide progress reports on that to the community. And then also key indicators can allow for monitoring of progress towards the goals over time. So looking at the outcomes, are these strategies actually resulting in what the city wants to achieve? So several indicators are already published in the housing dashboard that I mentioned before, but this could be expanded and built upon. It could be, more permit data to get at specific types of housing could be included in that. Additional cost burden summaries to really look at how is the city, are levels of cost burden decreasing over time. I think some of the milestones that were mentioned earlier could really be really effective there as well. So with that is my last slide, and I welcome any questions.
Actually, we'll hold the questions till we get to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I did want to just, now that he's shared those strategies, point to the proposed edits. And for the most part there, we needed to change the logo on page 1. We were adding an acknowledgements page with all of your names listed, the Planning Commission, Stakeholder Advisory Group, and staff, and the consultants. And then mostly Scrivener's errors. And then regarding strategy number 11, that states support relocation assistance for residents of manufactured home parks when parks are sold. We want to modify the language just slightly because we don't want to be in the business of enforcing the Mobile Home Landlord Tenant Act, but just kind of promoting awareness about it. And then we also heard in the meantime, since that draft was created, that it would be nice to include another consideration under that same strategy about revising the manufactured home standards. So there's some proposed language in there that we'd like to include. So that would just take into account the fact that we already have in there that we want to look at new areas for manufactured home parks. And while we're doing that, let's look at making the standards be more in line with current standards today. So going back to your staff report, we do have a recommended action, and staff is recommending adoption of the housing action plan, so it can be submitted to Commerce. And if you choose to approve the housing action plan, you could also include a proposal to include the recommendations or the revisions you received today. So I'm also available for questions along with the consultants.
Thank you. Floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it'll be made available after everyone has an opportunity to speak. Seeing no one in the audience, does anyone wish to provide testimony who's attending virtually? Seeing no one, does staff have anything to add?
At this point, no.
Council, do you have questions of the staff or public? Mary?
Yes. Some point, and I can't seem to find it now, he talks about notice of intent to sell. On the world, do we enforce that? But just,
The notice of intent to sell for the manufactured home parks or the,
no, he mentioned it.
Kevin, what was the
In
other one?
regard to the city buying property or something, and I'm still bewildered by
Oh.
what I completely, it flew by so fast and I was sitting there going, what in the world are we talking about?
That strategy was about the low-income houses or housing units that have covenants in place. And the consideration was the idea of asking for notice when they're going to sell those income restricted units, just to make the city aware. And what he was suggesting is that it might be an opportunity for the city, if they had the funds, to consider purchasing it to make sure it stayed affordable, or if we could look for other partners that had the ability to actually do that. And it's just a consideration. It's not something that it's saying we should do. And I pulled the language.
I think that's good.
Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
Any question, any other questions?
Okay, now I've got to, can I ask my second question?
Yep.
My second question, comment, has to do with, I noticed that there was another comment about reducing parking requirements in higher density areas to get a higher density if it was near a transit route. What I see as a problem is I know very few people who live in the middle of central Washington who don't have a vehicle.
Can you frame it as a question?
I'm getting there. I'm trying to figure out how we go about reducing parking. Again, we're down to 0.7 or something, which is less than one parking space per bedroom. It effectively becomes one parking space per bedroom, but if we go below that, I'm trying to understand what happens then, because we already have parking situation downtown, and with the streeteries and so forth, it's become more difficult. I'm trying to understand how we don't have mass transit to get people to other places. We don't have a readily available way to get people from Ellensburg to Seattle or things like that. And okay, so I'm supposed to ask it as a question.
Well,
Forget it.
if
Just
I may,
forget it if you want
and
me
it
to
may
put it in a
be
question, I don't know
just a
what-
quick staff response, but my understanding is that these are merely strategies, and that I think we would get into the conversation you're looking for, Mary, when we get to the implementation portion and the prioritization. Because that's
By
where,
that time, it's too late.
not if we don't change policy.
If
But
I
I don't want to get, if I may, I don't want to get into discussion at this point. We're in the public hearing. I need questions of staff. Rich, I think you have a question. And then
Yeah, so there was a slide about a quarter of the way through the process that said we're on pace for 107 units per year, if I was correct, and need to
Yes.
be substantially higher than that. And I guess so a series of questions. Does that include student housing and what Central's done with dorm rooms and things like that?
The group quarters housing is included in our data. Kevin, I don't know if you've looked at that, or if Lisa, you want to speak to that. But it's part of what we've tracked.
I believe that chart's looking at housing units, which wouldn't include dormitories, which are group quarters. We did analyze group quarters, but that particular chart was looking at housing units, which would be apartments or single family homes or anything else, but not dormitories.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, and I'm not arguing any of the primary sort of foundational arguments, or assumptions that make, all of these strategies look like things we should at least take a look at. I guess just processing the number of, close to 100 and 200 and 300 home housing developments that have been processed through the community and through city council and through the fire department, apartment complexes that are 400 or 500 units, student housing that are 400 or 500 units. The 107 just seems exceedingly low. I still get that there's a shortage, and I still get that there are low vacancy rates and income disparities, in accessing things. The numbers just seem off in my mind, and I'm having trouble processing that. That's my problem.
It's an average per year, and some years it's much larger than others. For instance, when the Helena apartments were built.
Over what period of time? Average over what period?
Oh, was this 2012 to 2018, Kevin?
Oh, so some of that.
I think it's the time period shown there. So it looks like 2015 to 2020.
Nancy G. And then
Well, the question I wanted to ask was your comment about reduced parking requirements. Is there, I believe you made that with reference to affordable housing building. Is there any data to suggest that works well? That in affordable housing areas, you don't need as much parking, or is there any kind of research to support that?
It is a very common strategy used by cities, and certainly it depends on the population served within an affordable housing development. What sort of vehicle needs and the context, but in many cases, residents of lower income affordable housing developments don't have as many vehicles per household, and if it's in areas that have good access to services, good access to transit, the need for multiple vehicles per household is reduced. I don't know of studies particular to Ellensburg, though. No.
And if I may, I would like to just provide a quick clarity thing. The way these strategies are set up is they're pretty broad. So that was under number 9, update the housing incentives. And we'll have a couple of paragraphs about it. And then there's considerations. In particular, this one states, additional incentives could also be considered for incorporation. And that's one that you could consider in the future. If you adopt this, it doesn't mean that we're jumping on changing those right away. You would have to prioritize that as something to study, as with any of them in this plan.
thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, so there was one slide that showed that 850 site visitors to the survey, and only 233 were completed. And do we have any idea why those other 600 and something didn't complete?
It's all anecdotal, but a lot of it we believe is people did not necessarily want to give out the intro data to sign up for the survey. And it was 15-minute survey. So I'm not certain if some of them started and didn't finish, but a lot of it had to do with the sign up. Now you could create a username that was not your own name, but we heard anecdotally that a lot of people didn't like that.
Thank you.
And that would go for all of the surveys.
You can do it,
that
well,
we've done under Be Heard then.
you can kind of decide by survey, but for the most part, it's for anybody doing an eBird, Be Heard eBird survey.
So we're not Leavenworth, but was there any look at the number of Airbnb or VRBOs in the community, like traditional single family homes being converted?
We did not study that.
So we don't know if we're losing housing to.
No, we don't.
anecdotally, but not-
And you're correct, we're not Leavenworth or Chelan, but no.
Okay.
That'd be interesting to know.
Any other questions? Public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may now begin discussion and deliberation of the matter. council? We're on resolution 2021-30.
I would move a resolution, and then you said 2021.
30. So a motion second to approve resolution 2021-30, a resolution adopting the 2021 Ellensburg Housing Action Plan.
Mr. Mayor, if I might suggest there were also the requested edits to the plan that have not been addressed by council in the motion.
I would amend my motion to include the suggested amendments that were provided.
Second.
So a motion second to approve the resolution 2021-30 adopting the Ellensburg Housing Action Plan incorporating the edits and modifications as presented on the dais. Is there any further discussion?
I was just, oh, go ahead.
I would like, the reason that I'm suggesting we move forward with this is I think that this gives us a base document to sort of work from as we make policy decisions and make improvements, modifications, and there may be particular strategies that we don't choose to implement, or we choose to implement them at a later time. And I think that this gives us that opportunity. I agree that there are probably things that we need to have conversations about and may not be, I'm not voting for the whole entire plan, and we can't implement the entire plan. What I'm voting for is that this is a place for us to start.
Other comments?
Yes, I was going to, much along the same lines, I was going to, first of all, appreciate the work that's been done. This is a really good, detailed, granular view. And to Councilmember Elliott's earlier point, I think that as we go forward, particularly in implementation, I think getting some more data, starting to build a really solid data set. I think this example on the construction, it would be nice, although not essential, it would be nice to have a year over year total and identify the source for the data, whether it's in an appendix. I know it's sort of explained, but I don't see a footnote or a source. But I don't think it's essential to be in the plan, but I think it would be good to sort of create that so that as data is acquired in future years, we can continue to grow. Because I think that, to the earlier point, I suspect our actual construction rate might be higher than the average if we look at the numbers, but that doesn't really matter. The policies and the strategies, I think, are valid. So the rate of construction, I think there's a scenario where we may not have as large a gap as we think we do, but that shouldn't deter us from implementing everything we can to address that. I mean, it's data, and we're talking, there's clearly need, but I don't think we need to get bogged down in the precise numbers, because I don't think we necessarily have.
Thank you. Other comments?
I would just say, thank you for all this hard work, and thanks to Burke. I've been on council for 4 years, and this brings together a lot of things that we've talked about a lot off and on. And we've said, yeah, we need to do that. And yeah, we need to do that. And now we've got them at least written down. So I'm looking forward to some of the successes that this could bring us in our housing issues. Thank you very much.
I want to say, I think this sets us on the right direction. I think we have a lot more work to do. I mean, it just in terms of coming back with actual ordinances that would change anything is going to be a lot of work. But one thing I would like to see is, the survey provided some good information. I guess my criticism of it was that everything was 5 to 7 stories, and that's not typical in Ellensburg. And so I'm not sure if that was an intent that we were going to try to get there to 5 or 7 stories. But what it didn't do is tell me where people would accept 5 or 7 stories as opposed to not, or were they not liking the design characteristics. So I'd like maybe further, if we go with further surveys, to try and tease that out.
Absolutely the plan.
Any other comments? We do have a motion second to adopt resolution 2021-30. All those in favor?
Aye.
The 2 vote aye, that motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to Burke also.
I know we're done, but I just want to say thank you very much for your patience and thank you, Burke. You guys have been wonderful to work with.
Thank you. Let's move down then to 9A. This is a rezone app, Z 1302. We're on page 269 in our packet.
Yep. Jamie presenting.
Yep, is the volume working tonight?
Yeah, it is. It's good. We're
All
already.
right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is Jamie Ailing with the Community Development Department, and I'll do my best to keep this one short as it is mainly a housekeeping issue. What you do have before you tonight is an ordinance to complete a rezone. This particular rezone, the application was submitted back in 2013 by Stephen Hayden for about 0.769 acres of property to change from industrial light to central commercial 2. The property is located at 606 West 3rd Avenue and is more notably recognized as the historic train depot. On October 21st, 2013, City Council held a public hearing to consider the proposed rezone, and council approved that rezone subject to the applicant providing a complete survey of the property. The zoning change is currently shown on the city zoning map, but due to an oversight was not documented in an ordinance as required by both city code and state law. The purpose of this meeting is to take the final step of approving the rezone through adoption of an ordinance as required by the RCW, and ultimately changing that property officially from light industrial to central commercial 2, so that business operations more suiting to the central commercial can be conducted in that location. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council,
I move adoption of ordinance number 4879.
It would be, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, it'd be first reading.
Okay, first reading.
Second approved.
so we have a motion and second to conduct first reading of the proposed ordinance 48, was it 48?
79.
79. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I too vote aye. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council waive rule 9.3B prohibiting final passage of an ordinance on the same day on which it was introduced.
Second.
I'll second.
So a motion and second to waive council rule 9.3B prohibiting final passage of an ordinance on the same day on which it was introduced. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries.
Mayor, move second reading and adoption of ordinance 4879, approving the rezone of parcel listed in our packet from industrial light to central commercial.
Second.
We have a motion second to conduct second reading and adoption of ordinance 4879, approving the rezone of a portion of parcel 216833 from IL industrial light to CC2 central commercial. Is there any further discussion? If the clerk would call the roll.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Hillquist,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
Morgan,
Yes.
Tab.
Yes, that motion carries.
An ordinance
you.
of the Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington, relating to zoning and amending Title 15 of the Ellensburg City Code by changing the zoning classification of certain property within the city of Ellensburg from light industrial IL to central commercial 2 CC2.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. That moves us then down to 11A. This is a council-funded grant program 2022 Park Partnerships Awards. We're on page 274.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Before you this evening is a request to approve the recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Commission authorizing grant funding distributions in the amount of $15,617.39 to the applicants and recipients of the Park Partnership Program, and to approve the necessary budget adjustments. The city received 3 project proposals for the 2022 Park Partnership Program this year. A total of $27,250 was requested through these 3 projects. Those projects were the West Ellensburg Park Fairpoint Field Development and Restoration Project, which was submitted by the Ellensburg Youth Rugby Program. That project calls for the development of a multi-purpose field at West Ellensburg Park that can accommodate rugby, soccer, flag football, and other activities. The funding request was for $15,000. The project scope calls for doing some leveling and some earthwork to the field, the installation of a new irrigation system, as well as either hydroseeding or putting down sod. The second proposal was from the Ellensburg Explorers, submitted by the Kittitas Environmental Education Network, also known as KEEN. And that proposal calls for the continuation of funding to provide tuition-free nature day camps in Ellensburg City Parks during the summer of 2022. That request was for $10,000. The final request was from the Ellensburg High School Environmental Club for Reeser Creek floodplain interpretive signs, a request of $2,250. And that project calls for the installation of 6 signs along the trails connecting Reeser Creek to the main trail that goes through the Reeser Creek floodplain property. The little side trails off of the main trail was constructed in the spring of 2021 by the same group, and they're looking to add the signage to that project. So the evaluation process calls for each of those applicants to go in front of the Parks and Recreation Commission and make their presentation, and the commission makes a recommendation to the city council. The partnership program was established in 2015. And the money is set aside through the budgetary process, 0.3% of the previous year's general sales tax revenue, which provides matching funds to community groups that want to do good things in our parks. So the commission deliberated over this at their September 15th, 2021 commission meeting, and came up with the following kind of responses to each of the projects. The Reeser Creek floodplain interpretive signage, they felt like that was a low funding request with a high community benefit. They liked the fact that it was student driven by the Ellensburg High School students. It improves an existing trail, and it provides some educational opportunities. And so they requested that project be funded at the full amount, which is $2,250. The second project was the West Ellensburg Park Fairpoint Field restoration work. They felt like that had a high level of program support. It continues on work that has already been done out at the park. They started some construction out there, started making some improvements back this past summer. And they like the fact that it takes an existing space and it improves it. And so the request amount was for $15,000 from the Ellensburg Rugby Club, but the commission is recommending that be funded at $10,000. The final project, the Ellensburg Explorers from Keene, there was some concern about this program, strictly due to the fact that if we are still kind of operating under COVID conditions, it may be difficult to deliver the program. And so, and the fact that this group has come to the city for the last 3 years and received funding. And so they felt like the remaining grant funds of $3,367.39, they would support providing that funding to the group. Kind of as a side note, we're in communications with Keene, trying to look at some opportunities to maybe develop some partnerships to continue to work with them to be able to provide these programs, because they are a real asset to the community. So with that, the staff recommends that council allocate the program funding consistent with the Parks and Rec Commission's recommendation. An additional note, the Rugby Club has requested permission to expend their funds in the fall of 2021 so they can start their improvements with the hopes of being able to use the field in 2022. The rest of the projects would go forward and be funded in 2022. We have done this before in the past when it's seasonally, when requests are seasonal in nature. A few years ago, we provided some funding to the cross country group when they did some grooming, when they purchased equipment to do grooming on the trails out at Rotary Park, and we did something similar back then. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Council. Got a couple of questions. Okay. Just a couple questions, Brad. Thanks for the update. First question, I didn't think about this until you just mentioned it. So the Keene proposal, you indicated that we funded that for the last 3 years, but that performance was less than optimal. Does that mean that all of the funds that were awarded in the prior years were not used, or they returned back?
No, they were used, and it was, if I portrayed it as less than optimal, that was a misunderstanding on my part. It's a great program, and they've done some amazing things and have served a lot of kids in that program. And so it has been, the program itself has been overwhelmingly successful. And so
That's great.
but it was more of a, we want to look to diversify these funds and look to use them in other areas.
I've got other questions, but I see Councilmember Elliott raised his hand. He may have a follow-on to that.
Well, as the Parks and Rec liaison, I think that the logic behind this is that for a park partnership award, you're talking about sort of two different focuses, and you have sort of investment in the parks and establishment of new programs sort of on the one side, the more heavily funded, and then you have an existing program that is serving a lot. But the thought is that maybe there needs to be a more sustainable revenue or a different kind of partnership rather than continually try to grant fund a program which is serving a lot of people in an existing program. So that was the logic behind
Okay.
this program.
I appreciate that explanation. That's helpful. And my other question may be directed, I don't know if it's more appropriately directed to the manager or to Mr. Case, but I think it's the question on the, it has to do with the recommendation to fund the rugby project in this calendar year. And I guess my question is the, so we're talking about 2022 grants. Are those the dollar amounts that were allocated, 15,600 or so, are those covered in our current biennial budget? So we're not getting out of cycle with our budget, is that right? Okay, so if we had this, I guess where I was going with that is whether this creates a precedent of funding projects prior to, you know, the actual project year, but we're limited by our budget, I guess, right? So if this application came in next year and we're just shy of going into a new 2-year biennial, we wouldn't have the ability to do it without some other budgetary gymnastics. Is that anywhere close to accurate?
Brad, I believe one of the requests was to move the dollars into the 2021, even though it's part of the biennial budget.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the precedent because it certainly wouldn't surprise me if other applicants said, you know, we could use the money sooner too. And I get that the seasonal nature of the work is important, but I just, as a precedent, I think it's something that we.
Yeah, I think this project in particular is.
I would just note that's why this is in front of council at this point. The other, the council grants, we've met, as you know, and those recommendations are ready to move forward. But because this accelerated, to your point, we typically can't, my recollection is we typically contract in November, December, and then begin implementation in January because it's, so I wanted to make sure that council was aware that of the action that we were taking and the potential precedent. And if staff want to address that precedent setting, that might be helpful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, Brad discussed or shared some of the precedent we talked about. And so we've done this in the past. They've been seasonally sensitive. It was a one-time option. There hasn't been a regular practice, but this seems to have some similar characteristics to that movement.
And I'll just add this particular project has started. They've started work on it already through an agreement that the council entered into with the rugby club back in July 19 of 2021. And so I think they're further along probably than any other program that has come before the commission through the park partnership program. And so I think in that respect, they're also a little bit unique because they're trying to really build on some of the outreach they've already done and some of the fundraising efforts and some of the matching dollars that they've been able to capitalize on. So I think it's a strike while the iron's hot, and let's see if we can get this thing done before the season starts next spring.
Thank you. Council?
So I just have a quick question before I make a motion. We have to do this two separate things for the budget amendments, or can I do it as one motion? motion. So I would move that we approve the recommendation of the Parks and Rec Commission to authorize grant funding distributions in the listed amount to the recipients and approve the budget adjustments as set forth in the report.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Commission to authorize grant funding distributions in the amount of $15,617.39 to the recipients as outlined in the report, and approve the necessary budget adjustments as set forth. Any further
Yeah, I would just
discussion?
like to, I sat in and watched the process unfold, and it was kind of cool to have close to the amount of money that was requested, obviously, in the case of the program for Keene. But again, I really do think that that is a different kind of program at this point, and really does belong in a different place or in a different venue to discuss. I think the opportunity to sort of increase or improve the infrastructure in a part of our park system that was starting to fall apart a little bit, and establish a new program in rugby seems to be an opportunity that'll kind of take on a life of its own, and won't be in front of the partnership program in future years, which is what we're intending. It's kind of cool.
Good. Other comments, questions, or statements? We do have a motion and second to approve the recommendations and make the necessary budget adjustments. All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the professional services agreement with Aspect Engineering for Gateway 2 design.
Mayor, members of the council, thanks for having me here this evening. I'm John Marl with Public Works. Yes, before you tonight is the professional services agreement with Aspect Engineering to begin the design and permitting of Gateway 2 on Vantage Highway. That will need authorization for the city manager to sign. I have a short presentation, but I'm going to share my screen here real quick. So a couple of years ago, we received quite an amount of grant funding from the Department of Ecology for both Gateway 2 and Gateway 1. And tonight we're here to talk a little bit about Gateway 2, but I thought what I would also do is give you guys a little update on Gateway 1. We ran into a little bit of a snag this summer with some underground utilities. I'm confident that we will be out to bid late fall, early winter. That will be built next spring and summer. And that project, both projects, are to infiltrate stormwater from the roadway to treat it before it goes into Mercer, Wilson, Whiskey, and Lyle Creeks. Gateway 1 scope is from Weenass all the way to almost Red Horse Diner, both sides of the street. And with stormwater LID retrofit projects like these, you get your big bang for your buck. You get power poles that go away. You get street trees. You get recreation, non-motorized transportation. There's a lot of amenities that come with these types of projects. And so I'm excited to let you know that Gateway 1 will be built next summer. And we are moving forward. The design is finished on that one. We're done. The permitting is finished. We're just having to work out some utilities with some issues with some underground utilities. That said, I'm going to move on to Gateway 2. Gateway 2 is on Vantage Highway, and it's kind of from Vista Road all the way out to the new city limits east of town. Same scope, same project. You've got a 12-foot pedestrian bicycle path on the south side of the road. You got a 7-foot sidewalk on the north side of the road. Street trees, power poles go away. You get your stormwater swales, all your stormwater infiltrates before going into Lyle Creek. We will not do anything with the Fenning intersection that you see here. That was built just a couple of years ago. We will join up to that, and then from that point, keep going east past the fire station, which you see here in your screen. Again, same thing as Gateway 1. We're going to infiltrate all the stormwater, and we're going to put in the 12-foot pedestrian bicycle path on the south side, and then the 7-foot on the north side. And it terminates right at about the new city limits, which is kind of shy of number 6 road, a block or two away. But with that, you get an artist rendition, and For the sake of the grant, the consultant Aspect did this artist rendition for me at no cost. So we only showed it on one side of the road. So don't be confused. Gateway 2 will be on both sides of the road. It's just, this is what it'll look like on the north side of the road. And so I'm excited to get this project started and get the design and the permitting started. And hopefully about the time we're done with the design and the permitting on this, Gateway 1 will have been built. I'll be here next year at the same time, probably asking for final acceptance on Gateway 1. And then this will start construction out on Vantage Highway. With that said, if you guys have any questions tonight, I'm happy to take them. I'm going to log out of this thing here real quick. Stop sharing. There we go. Do you folks have any questions?
Council, Mayor?
John, can you tell them about the trees?
Mary and I chose ginkgo trees, the male maidenhair. So let me tell you about the trees. The trees on both projects are ginkgo, and they're that for several reasons. One, they turn gold all at the same time. They drop their leaves all at the same time, making it easy for maintenance. We will close down the trails with bollards that'll be in place. We'll run the sweeper up and down the trail one day, south side, next day, north side. It makes fall cleanup so simple. The other thing is I like about the ginkgo tree, I did a lot of research. They're probably the best pollutant uptake tree that you can put in a stormwater project. They require very little water. They love sun, and they do well with car emissions. Probably the best tree to put out there. That came from a Caltech study that I looked at. And like I said, in the fall, they'll all be gold at one time. And it just makes maintenance a lot easier so that we can clean that up and not have leaves on the trail and the sidewalk. So
thank you.
Anything else?
Other questions?
Mary? Did I cover that?
Yeah, we're good. Council?
Okay.
I'll move we authorize the city manager to sign the agreement with Aspect Engineering and approve the necessary budget adjustment.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve, to authorize city manager's signature on the agreement with Aspect Engineering and approve the necessary budget adjustments. Is there further discussion?
No, just thank you. Nice job.
Yeah, I
Great
mean,
project.
well, yeah, it's
I can't wait.
a good thing.
I hope it's in before I'm dead.
We have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I too vote aye. That motion carries. That brings us to the manager's report. Thank you, John.
Thank you. This is Heidi Baron-Sternoway, your city manager. A few things to report on today. Sometimes when we don't have employees, we have the opportunity to grow our own, and especially in very specialized fields. Just congratulations to Avery Miller. Avery's actually been with the city for 5 years, been part of the apprenticeship program, and Avery passed the journey person, line person test and is now fully capable and fully part of our line crew and our city light crew. So congratulations and well done. That's a lot of work for Avery and the team. Second, we would like to request that council set a study session for next Monday, October 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. Just to continue our discussion on the zoning and land development code ordinance.
Second. Motion second to set a study session for Monday, October 11th, 2021 from 6 to 8 p.m. for continued discussion regarding the land development code and zoning amendments. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries.
Thank you. And there also is a public hearing that is scheduled for October 18th, which is your next regular meeting. And that's on the surplus property, the 2 parcels on First and Pine. No action is required on that. Just an update. Couple other items to report. Just a reminder, the Ellensburg Police Department does an annual Police Citizens Academy. They are actually taking applications for that. you're welcome to call the police department. They can connect you with an application. That program starts this month, and it's a wonderful opportunity to see inside the police department and understand really some wonderful aspects of public safety in our community. Finally, I have, let's see here, a request for broadband, the rural, it's a Public Works, let's see here, Public Works. Okay, Public Works board members, it's a rural broadband program. Kittitas County has asked for letters of support, and this is a request that the letter was emailed out for Mayor Tab and Councilmember Lopez to sign on the city's behalf.
You want a motion on that, or are we good?
Support would be great, so motion would be wonderful.
So I guess we need a motion for,
I'll move to authorize the mayor and my signature on the letter of support for the county's broadband project.
I will second, but it seems a little self-serving.
she's not getting
I'm
broadband
not
out of
getting
it.
paid.
What if Yeah, she gets to sit on the
She was
commission.
getting naming rights on a stadium.
Yeah, no. So do you have a motion second to, for the mayor's signature on, and Councilmember Lilquist's signature on the, in support of the Kittitas County Rural Broadband Project? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries.
That
Thank
is
you.
the end of my report. Thank you.
Let's do the council reports. Rich, you want to start?
Yes. So I know we didn't have a COVID update, and that was probably welcome, but I will say that we have started in the pharmacies and clinics and stuff to do the booster shots for the approved groups, and those are available as necessary and for people who can't move around the community very easily. Have had some conversations regarding the stalled 0.1% for mental and behavioral health services effort, and so that's going on in the background again, just for the public, as that's a commissioner, ultimately a commissioner decision at the time. That conversation is still happening, and we're still trying to figure out sort of what the best way to bring that in front of the community or to the commission, back to the commissioners. And
So if I may,
yes,
before we get off that, since you broached it. You did broach it, and I did not. So I'd like to put it in front of council, an act, perhaps it could come back to us next meeting. I think we recognize and have supported the 0.1% as a council. And I think we recognize that there are increasing needs that behavioral health needs in this community, whether it's around substance abuse or mental health issues, which are simply not being met by the resources available. We also should recognize that the 0.1% could become a critical element for countywide strategies, not just strategies that would benefit folks in the city. I would suggest that we ask staff to come back. We need to set a public hearing.
It's not if you're referring to potential action by the county, it's not technically a ballot measure, but you may wish to, which would require a hearing, but you may wish to treat it as such, since it is potentially suggesting support for a tax measure. So the answer to your question is, it's not required as a public hearing, but I think it would be the prudent thing to do.
So I guess where I would go with it then is, because I think that the commissioners, if we're willing to take a public stance, I think the commissioners are willing to revisit the public hearing, possibly. And at least we start that conversation sooner rather than later. So with Terry's guidance there, I think what we would ask is a motion for a public hearing to consider a resolution in support of the 0.1% sales tax in support of behavioral health.
So moved.
It would be for the October 18th meeting. I didn't provide that.
second.
We have a motion second to set a public hearing for council to consider a resolution in support of the 0.1% tax levy for in support of behavioral health for the council meeting of October 18th.
Can I clarify? This is to support the county's imposition of the tax, not the city's.
Yeah, the city is not, as my understanding is that the city is not able, because of the population, to take independent action. So it either goes at the county level or it doesn't. If you want to talk Route 2,
Not at this time.
no, kidding. Anyway, we do have a motion second to set the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Rich, for bringing that up, and thank you, council, for supporting that. I think it's potentially a major step. Nancy?
Enjoyed a productive day with Mike Mowry at our city council retreat. We've had this DEI commission meeting since then, and starting to set some priorities and develop our work plan as soon as we can get that done.
That's it. Tristan?
No boards and commissions. Sounds like there will be meetings at the federal level to talk about pediatric vaccine approvals on October 26th. So looking forward to that. I did walk my kids home from Mount Stewart today. And I can, one of the members of the public described it as a scene from Mad Max. There's some areas I might not disagree with that description. My husband joked, because he does the walk daily with the kids, that his favorite part was over there, that board with the nails sticking out. And definitely traffic is a big deal. We walked on bluegrass, and less so the traffic, more the people going very quickly around a lot of kids. It was distressing. I see why it would bring a neighborhood here for public comment. I yelled at a driver myself. So, end of report.
Welcome to Third Avenue.
Were there any expletives involved or?
No, not today.
You're up.
I have nothing other than I've responded to citizen concerns in emails. No meetings. that I can remember.
It's always the critical piece, isn't it? David?
I missed the last county homeless and affordable housing committee meeting. So I was at a council retreat, so that's my excused absence. I also wandered through, spent a little bit of time wandering through the Bite of the Berg and the Buskers. And good to see people out and enjoying themselves. The weather's been great, so I think that's it's good to see people downtown and
Thanks, Mary. Just to reinforce we actually had the opportunity to do Bite of the Berg. I was working with Betsy Dunbar, our transportation supervisor, I think is great interaction, good energy, actually fairly positive, well, actually not even fairly, positive feedback on Central Transit and the work that's being accomplished. We got some good feedback on the new logo. I would also, Buskers, I didn't ask the mayor in there, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I did ask the mayor, nothing earth shattering. I got to share the booth with Heidi, who's much gentler than Nicole when it comes to trying to help me maintain decorum. I would also, though, just to David's point about Buskers, it was structured very differently this year. It really was a family event downtown. They did an incredible job at Rotary Park. And, I mean, there was a bounce thing, there was music going, there were different activities. Just a really, really good energy, I thought, this year around that. So it was a good event. I don't think I have anything else. If I do, it's to Nancy's point, I can't remember. So let's call ourselves adjourned, go home, and thank you all.